Marvel Team Up had been running for 5 years when Marvel decided that it had earned a shot at an annual. It could have had one sooner, had Marvel not gone cool on the idea of annuals for a few years in the mid-70s. Plus, there was Giant-Size Spider-Man, the quarterly title that was itself an annual-sized team-up mag. That series had now ended, Marvel was getting back into annuals, and in 1976, the first Marvel Team-Up annual hit the shelves. Fittingly, it featured the big team of the moment, the all-new, all-different X-Men. They had made their debut just a year before and had been an instant hit. Len Wein had written the famous first issue of Giant-Size X-Men, but once they had transitioned into their standard title from issue 94, it was the one and only Chris Claremont who was the scribe. He was also a regular writer for Marvel Team-Up, so was the perfect man to write this annual. However, he didn't. Neither did Len Wein. Nor was the original artist Dave Cockrum involved, beyond providing the cover. Instead, Bill Mantlo was the author. He was a very good writer who has produced some great work over the years, creating not only some great storylines, but also some great characters. Although, let it not be forgotten that he also wrote a handful of issues of such non-classics as The Human Fly and Team America, and the whole of the Man from Atlantis tie-in series. It's alright talking about Rom and the Incredible Hulk and the Micronauts, but no one ever talks about those, do they? Despite his mostly great track record, he had minimal experience writing about the Children of the Atom, penning a solitary issue of their series before this annual. As for art, that was provided by our old friend Sal Buscema, whose usual penchant for arched eyebrows and wide open mouths was mostly softened by Mike Esposito's inks. I said mostly. Now right off the bat we have an opening splash page that is very old school. In a way it's almost reminiscent of the cover of Giant-Size X-Men issue 1, as we see the team running towards us, although not bursting out of the page. And it's only after we've taken in their dynamic charge that we notice that there's a news story there about a hydrogen warhead blasting out a cavern, and that actually they're all running away from a massive mushroom cloud. It's an image that is more symbolically representative of the tale as a whole, rather than a snapshot of an upcoming scene. As soon as we've taken it in, we flash back to the beginning of how this whole sorry saga began. And it began at a top secret government base called The Nest. We meet Special Projects Investigator for the United States Senate, Stephen Marchese. He is there to check on the Nest's progress on a project aimed at solving the problem of the world's depleting energy resources. The base is staffed, apart from its robot guards, by 8 of the world's greatest scientific minds, including Steve's ex-wife. One of the team, Araman Neela, a scientist hailing from India, is busy working on a very sensitive operation involving irradiated materials. But luck is not only against him this day, but against everybody there, because Steve's ex-wife picks up on some tremors, an earthquake directly beneath them that destabilizes the sensitive equipment, shattering the protective screen between the radiation and the team. As if receiving a lethal dose of radiation isn't bad enough, that irradiated material has become very unstable. It begins to glow, to throb, and then explode, killing everybody at the base instantly. Meanwhile, high above the American Southwest, a conference is taking place. High above? Oh yeah, because this conference is taking place on a plane. The conference is the first of its kind in 2 ways. First of all, it is the world's first international conference on man-made mutation. Secondly, it will continue in that plane for a whole week, even refuelling whilst in the air. What could possibly go wrong? Reed Richards was invited, but he couldn't attend. Nonetheless, there are plenty of other big brains there, speaking in sentences that are completely unfathomable. To report on a conference like this, you need a reporter, nay, a shutterbug, with a scientific mind. along with Peter Parker, is something of a firebrand, Senator Turner, who we are told followers of Skull the Slayer ought to recognise. Also, there are some special guests there at the behest of the absent Reed Richards. Of course, for the conference on man-made mutation, it had to be the X-Men, didn't it? Senator Turner massively overreacts to their presence, saying that Reed Richards is as bad as everybody else. He thinks he can get whatever he wants. Naturally, if anyone is going to take issue with this, it's Logan. And indeed, he does. But that little scuffle is interrupted as the pilots spot ahead of them a massive black cloud, which causes the plane's instruments to go crazy and it begins to plummet. And as the terrified passengers look out of the windows, they see the Nest's robot sentinels flying up to greet them. But it isn't a friendly greeting. They want to make sure that the job is finished. Luckily for the conference attendees, they have on board over half a dozen of the world's leading superheroes. Professor X orders his young students into action, and Peter tells us that he recognised the professor and a few of the others immediately. So he assumed the rest of them must be the new X-Men that the papers have been talking about. Yes, the new X-Men. This is one of that team's earliest appearances, having only made their debut a few months before. Cyclops is one of the first to deal with their robot attackers. And no, he isn't firing his optic blasts through his glasses. Instead, the ruby quartz lenses flip up to allow him to use his powers. That's a bit of unnecessary engineering, isn't it? Couldn't he just do that? It works though, destroying one of the robot attackers, whilst a second one is tearing its way inside the fuselage. By which time Peter has had chance to change and Spider-Man is there to help out. Banshee is more Irish than ever, and he and Storm head out of the plane to take the battle to the robots. As for the hole in the plane, don't worry. Apparently Spider-Man sealed it using his webbing, and that's going to stop the depressurization of the cabin. Okay. One of the robots breaks into the cockpit, but Colossus is there to start a team action to take the thing out. He launches it in the direction of Logan, who gives it a slash before it heads towards Jean Grey, who tells us that her mind blasts can disrupt the thing's circuits, but she seems unable to slow it down. I'd have thought that was well within her abilities. Luckily, Spidey is there to finish off the team effort and put the thing out of action. Good stuff. Oh, I forgot, they're crashing. It seems they forgot too, as the Professor reminds them. Scott is up front. He could land the thing, but he can't for the life of him decrease the plane's speed, meaning they will land, but far too fast for any of them to survive. Whilst Banshee and Storm finish off the last of the robots, Spidey says he's got an idea, he could slow them down. Oh no, he's not going to, is he? He bloody did as well, a classic web parachute. But fair play to him, it works, and the plane, in a fashion, lands. Happily, there are no casualties. But are the passengers grateful for that? Of course not. We have not only Spider-Man here, but the X-Men too, which calls for a double dose of irrational public hatred. So there are claims that those robots weren't after the conference members, they were after the muties, and even that they are probably working hand in hand with communists. Interestingly, it is a Russian member of the delegation that then points everyone to the source of the attack. He has with him the world's most sophisticated radiation detector. He was going to unveil it at the conference, but instead he has now used it and traced a very unusual, very strong source of radiation nearby. And it corresponds to a burnt mound in the desert. We know that it was the location of the Nest, but our heroes don't, so they need to investigate. Especially when Storm points out that she saw the robots come from that mound. The Russian delegate has some anti-radiation spray that he can spray the heroes with so that they can approach the site safely. He's full of handy gadgets, isn't he? As they approach the site, Spidey and Wolverine butt heads, because I think that's mandatory whenever Wolverine is in one of these tales. And Banshee and Storm, being the only people there that can fly, pass through the rainbow-coloured screen of radiation to investigate the site properly. The rest of the heroes are left outside, but after a while, Spidey begins to get a bit concerned. He points out that Banshee and Storm have been gone a while, and that maybe the rest of them should follow them. Wolverine takes very bizarre exception to this, saying that those two can take care of themselves, and besides, he doesn't recall anyone asking him for suggestions. Spidey snipes back that he doesn't recall anyone asking Wolverine for anything, and so Wolvie says, "That did it, chum," and pops his claws. What, is he going to stab him for calling him Big Mouth? Inside the hole, which of course is the site of the nest, Banshee and Storm find that everything in there is melted and twisted, even the rock itself. But they don't get to do much more investigating, as both of them are quickly taken out by some mystery foes, one of whom says that the One is still outside, waiting. Actually, whoever this is clearly a big Punisher fan. One of our two mysterious figures makes the decision to leave the nest and get the One. Emerging from the nest, he announces himself as Yama Dharma, soon to be known to our heroes as Death. Colossus is the first to fall, but not Jean Grey, as she stops this being's power with her mind. Spidey tries to whip up a web shield, but it doesn't stand a chance against Yamadama's power. Nightcrawler and Wolverine pitch in against the enemy, but when Spidey sees that their efforts are meeting with limited success, he decides to give them a hand. But all three of them, along with their companions, are soon downed by a high-pitched wailing that drives them to the brink of madness. Colossus resists for a time, but eventually he too succumbs to that noise. The noise generated by the power of a woman called Kali, the goddess of dark madness. The battle over, they can now focus their attention on one member of the X-Men in particular. Our heroes regain consciousness sometime later within the nest. They are all held in some kind of force field, all except Jean, who now sits semi-conscious in her Phoenix outfit, which is such a great costume. They're all being watched over by several figures who Jean awakes to see have incredible power. And that's not all she sees, because as her colleagues struggle against their confinement, she sees within her mind the history of these 8 beings. I'm sure you recognise them as the former scientists from the nest. Killed in that earlier explosion, 8 of the 9 were brought back to life. The one who remains dead is Araman Neela, the Indian scientist that was closest to that radioactive material. As the radioactive explosion tore through him, it took the thoughts from his mind and infused his colleagues with powers inspired by them. Therefore, they now stand before the heroes as modern-day versions of Indian gods. Whilst this history lesson is unfolding, Nightcrawler has done something interesting. Naturally, he tried to use his teleportation powers to escape the force field. It failed. However, it did cause a rift that resulted in Banshee being freed. He then uses his power to free Colossus, who, without any ado, frees Cyclops. So maybe they weren't all being held in one large force field, but individual force fields, tailored to their individual powers. Whatever, the sequence continues, as Cyclops' optic blasts help to free Spider-Man. And then, God knows how, but Spider-Man's webs free Storm, before she then releases Wolverine. And what are the modern gods doing during all of this? Well, naturally, they are explaining their plan. They explain to Phoenix that despite being powerful, Their current state is unstable. They must transcend this aspect of being or die. To carry through their plan, they need more power, and they are getting that power by drawing it from planet Earth itself. It will help them transcend to the heavens, but it will leave the Earth a dying husk. And why are they telling Phoenix all of this? It's because they see her as one of them. They want her to join them and join her power to theirs so that they can complete their goal. Wolverine says that she can tell them what they can do with their offer. She says if they can see inside her mind, then they know her answer. Do you think she's giving them the psychic bird? Whatever it is, they don't like it, and it all kicks off. And maybe these gods have been weakened, because although Wolverine's attack again is ineffectual, Cyclops' optic blasts certainly aren't. And Spider-Man punching a god? I don't know. Seems a bit basic, doesn't it? The one called Carly tries the sound trick again, but this time they're ready for it, and Banshee gives her a taste of her own medicine. Again and again, with the X-Men working as a team, they overcome their opponents, until Storm conjures up a maelstrom that seems to be far more effective than it has any right to be, as the gods begin to dissipate. But their fate is now linked with the Earth. If they cease to be, so will the entire planet. It seems that they didn't just want Phoenix to join them, but her power was going to hold them together until they completed that final transformation. Of course, she didn't join them. She didn't help keep them together, and hence everything is coming apart. Spider-Man, though, has thought of a solution to this problem, and incredibly, so has Cyclops. Why is it incredible that two characters would think of the same solution? Well, wait till you see what the solution is. Using a leap of logic that is in itself almost godlike, Spidey says, well, what if they were removed from Earth? If they could be sent up into space, there's plenty of energy up there for them to use and keep themselves either alive or to complete that transition. Wolverine says, great idea, but how are they going to do it? And as I've already said, Cyclops also unfathomably has concocted the same plan as the web swinger. They all hold hands, which is nice. Phoenix, by touching the one called Brahma, allows his mind force to flow through her. She then projects that mind force, and Nightcrawler uses his power to teleport it. Can he do that? I don't think he can do that. Teleport other things and not himself? That's a first. He teleports the force into the path of Cyclops' concussion beam, and then that is held in place by Banshee's power. Has anyone got a truck I can borrow to drive through the holes in this plan? The energies build and build until Cyclops then pushes them beyond the Earth's atmosphere and out into space. And admittedly, that is an impressive image of Cyclops in action. And he and Spider-Man thought of that plan at the same time? Do me a favour. It worked, of course. And all that is left is for Professor X to do a bit of housekeeping by wiping from the memories of all of the delegates on that plane the events that had happened. I guess that will help with future continuity. The next year's offering was unique in this series of annuals as it only featured 2 superheroes, albeit Marvel's most popular at the time. Usually they would feature Spidey teaming with a whole group, if not a selection of heroes, the larger page count allowing for each character to have more time in the spotlight. For example, the following year the Hulk again featured, this time teaming with not just Power Man and Iron Fist, but Machine Man too. Then the year after, well, Spidey is back in the lead role, and Power Man and Iron Fist return too. Not sure how they wangled that one. Plus, they are joined by Daredevil and Moon Knight. Now that is a street level lineup. And for this kind of street level lineup, who would you want writing it? Of course, it's Frank Miller. And who would you want on art duties? Oh, well, you've got Herb Trimpe, although Frank does also provide the cover. So let's get down and dirty on the streets of New York City. We begin in a very low-key way with nothing more dramatic than a collision between two cars in a busy New York City. Even Spider-Man, who is on hand to catch pictures of the scene, complains that it's been a quiet night and all he's got to show for it is some pictures of a crummy fender bender. But this collision quickly takes on more significance because one of the people involved in it doesn't just drive a purple car, doesn't just wear purple clothes, his skin is also purple. He is the Purple Man. The other car contains a couple of heavies, and as they begin to try to push the Purple Man around, he uses his power on them. He says they've upset him, he can't let that go unpunished, so they must punch each other into unconsciousness, which they then of course duly oblige. Now, in the 21st century, the profile of the character of the Purple Man has been risen mainly because of his association with Jessica Jones, be it in comic books or on TV. But at this point, when he appears here, he had only made 4, 5 appearances, mainly in Daredevil's comic, but not many at all. Now, Spider-Man has been watching all this and he's not happy. However, the Purple Man isn't happy with Spidey's rough treatment of him. And he says, why don't you go climb a lamppost? Which, naturally, Spidey instantly does. When he says that Spidey should also recite some Shakespeare, and Spidey says, I don't really know a lot of Shakespeare, he says, well, what do you know? Spider-Man's pop culture references always help to date his stories, and this story is no exception. Because he says he knows Elvis Costello, and then gives us a rendition of Oliver's Army. 1981 is alive and well. As the Purple Man leaves the scene, he does 2 things. First of all, he discovers that there is a large amount of heroin in that other vehicle, which he isn't interested in. Secondly, he tells all 3 participants that they will completely forget about his involvement. The Purple Man may not have been interested in all that heroin, but the New York Police Department were when they arrived on the scene. And that is bad news for one Mr. Wilson Fisk. He is very unhappy at having his business disrupted, and so he sends a hitman by the name of Heinrich to find the owner of the purple car and bring him to the Kingpin. Later on, as Peter Parker is watching The Tube, he sees a news report about a collision between a purple Rolls-Royce and another car which contained an estimated $6 million worth of heroin. At the mention of the purple Rolls-Royce, Pete's spider sense kicks in, although he can't work out why. He is even more confused when the report mentions that Spider-Man was found at the scene hanging from a lamppost, something he has no memory of. Seeing that Peter is a bit upset, Aunt May puts one of his records on to cheer him up. And again, his spider sense kicks in. Pete then has a brainwave. If something did happen last night, maybe he captured it on his camera. And after a brief visit to the dark room, he has some pictures which help to jog his memory. Knowing that his spider sense is set off by this Purple Man, he decides to swing around the city, hoping that the spider sense will alert him to where the Purple Man is. Someone who has found him is Heinrich the Hitman. Although due to the Purple Man's powers, the tables are quickly turned. Although he then thinks, actually, don't kill yourself, because it could be interesting to find out why you're here and who has sent you. Meanwhile, Spidey has been drawn to the Plaza Hotel, which is where the Purple Man had been hiding out, but now he arrives to find 2 police officers balancing on their heads. And there's someone else there. Daredevil explains about the disrupted drug shipment, and he says he knows that the Kingpin will hunt down the person responsible, and he's worried about what that means for the city. He also douses the 2 police officers with a cold bucket of water, the shock of which snaps them out of their Purple Man-induced trance. With both heroes now taking to the skies, the old trusty spider sense soon picks up on the whereabouts of the villain. Despite Daredevil's warning, Spidey goes rushing in. He disarms Heinrich, and then he is told to go take a flying leap. Spider-Man is fully able and happy to oblige, and we're all grateful for Daredevil's intervention. Soon after that, the Purple Man and Wilson Fisk come face to face, and Purple Man actually uses his powers on the Kingpin. Well, he tries to at least. But after telling the Kingpin to blow his own brains out, it seems a man of Wilson Fisk's character is not so easily influenced. But it does give him an idea. He is going to use the Purple Man's power to kill his enemies, beginning with Daredevil. But weren't there supposed to be 3 other guest stars in this comic? There were indeed. Let's go meet 2 of them. Power Man and Iron Fist have just been to the cinema, in their superhero costumes it seems, and as Iron Fist is criticising the portrayal of martial arts in that film, the sound of gunfire rings out. A woman nearby is being shot at from a car. Luckily, she has Power Man to hide behind, and another yellow shirt bites the dust. Iron Fist deals with the car from which the gunshots were fired, and after everyone has had a chance to calm down, the girl explains that she had overheard 2 men planning to kill somebody. They saw her and so sent their friends after her. She doesn't know who is going to be killed, but she does know that it's going to take place at a charity show at the convention centre tonight. Colleen Wing says it sounds like a setup, and Power Man says maybe it is, but he and Iron Fist are going to check it out. So who's missing? Ah yes, Moon Knight. He is busy on a New York rooftop meeting up with one of his informants, a man named Pigeon. Whilst they're talking, Moon Knight notices that someone has their eyes, or rather their scope, set on Pigeon. He sees the figure and takes him out with what I like to call a moonerang. After hanging the sniper up to dry, Pigeon explains that he was probably trying to kill him because he knew that there was going to be a big hit tonight. He doesn't know who the target is, but he does know that it's going to be at the charity show. Moon Knight doesn't entirely know if he can trust him, but he's going to check it out anyway. And it seems he's right not to trust him, because Pigeon and the apparent assassin were working together all along. They've fooled Moon Knight, just like Kingpin ordered. Now, all this talk of a charity event, I know someone who never misses an opportunity to attend a charity gala, and that is the self-appointed champion of the people, J. Jonah Jameson. He is in fine spirits as he prepares to leave the offices of the Daily Bugle to attend the show, but those spirits are quickly doused when he discovers that Joe Robertson is briefing Spidey and Daredevil because he too has heard about this apparent hit tonight. And we all know how jolly Jonah Jameson feels about vigilantes. So now all of our protagonists are aware of the apparent hit tonight, and they're all going to check it out. I guess that makes it more believable that they will all cross paths rather than just sheer coincidence. But of course, it's the Kingpin that has arranged all this, that is pulling the strings and has made sure that they have all heard about this apparent hit. Although I'm not sure how that works with Power Man and Iron Fist, unless the girl was working for the Kingpin, but then she was being shot at. So it is that night all of our heroes are at the charity event. It's interesting seeing how different Luke Cage looks without his headband, and how nice of Peter to take his current girlfriend, Deb Whitman, to the site of a possible assassination. Jameson is the first speaker of the night, and he introduces the first big guest, Kilgrave, the Purple Man. A man who, quickly after ascending the podium, points out Matt Murdock and says to the crowd, "You may know him as a famous lawyer, but that's only half the story." Kilgrave knows that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, and Matt, fearing that he is going to reveal this to everybody present, acts quickly. He grabs a cigar out of the mouth of the man sitting next to him and throws it onto an empty chair. This is 1981, so all furniture is made out of incredibly flammable material, and as the seat starts to smoulder, Matt shouts out, "Fire!" to distract from Kilgrave's speech. And it certainly works. Ladies, gentlemen, please leave in an orderly fashion. All of our heroes use this utter chaos as an opportunity to change into their costumes. And then the old Marvel team-up trope of misunderstandings goes into overdrive. Moon Knight sees Spider-Man and thinks, could he be the killer and Jameson is the target? So he launches himself towards him. However, Daredevil sees him and takes him out of the picture. As Power Man and Iron Fist climb onto the stage, Iron Fist says, "Careful, Luke, the situation is confused." Understatement of the year. Luckily, Spidey begins to talk sense to them all. He points out that they're all on the same side. That proves to Jonah that they're all menaces and they're trying to spoil his moment in the limelight. But what about the Purple Man? Bad news there, I'm afraid. Because he is still at the podium. He has the mic and he uses that and his power to tell the entire assembled audience, kill the heroes. So our heroes are now united, but they face the even larger united ranks of the theatre audience. Luke Cage provides them with a means of exit. However, getting out of the theatre doesn't get them out of trouble, because the whole event, the Purple Man's instructions to kill the heroes, was televised, and New York's general population are up for the job. Moon Knight and Daredevil hide back in the shadows and allow the other heroes to draw away the crowd. That's very good of them. And Daredevil says to Moon Knight there are a few things he needs to know about the Purple Man before they try to tackle him. One person already setting out to tackle the Purple Man is our old hitman friend Heinrich. Although Moon Knight is unhappy with an armed man strolling around the theatre, so he takes him out. In doing so, he notices that Heinrich has some tiny earplugs in his ears designed to blank out any sound, given to him by the Kingpin. That leaves Daredevil himself to deal with Kilgrave. Now in the past, Daredevil has been able to resist the Purple Man's suggestions, but not, it seems, today. First of all, he drops his billy club, as commanded. And then Kilgrave thinks, what should I do now? Order you to stop breathing? To beat your head against the wall? No. Why not strangle yourself? It's probably the least effective suggestion, isn't it? I mean, as soon as you start to lose consciousness, your grip will loosen. We don't have to worry about that anyway, because now Moon Knight is getting involved. Kilgrave tells him to go eat his cape. Twice, to no effect. But Moon Knight certainly has an effect on him. Dee thanks Moon Knight, saying, "You saved my life." No, he didn't. But he also says, "I guess you heard Kilgrave calling me by my true identity, Matt Murdock." Moon Knight says, "Hold on, stop talking until I get these things out of my ears." And he reveals that he'd been using Heinrich's earplugs. That is why Kilgrave's powers didn't affect him. And it also means he didn't hear Daredevil's real name being used. As they shake on it, we are treated to what must be the biggest Spider-Man head ever, as he and Harlem's finest are still trying to evade that crowd. Getting up high, Spidey manages to cast a net over pretty much all of them, but that is only going to slow them down. It won't stop them. And now Spider-Man has a plan, based on his earlier encounter with those hand-standing cops. Now, I was beginning to think that Power Man and Iron Fist were pretty surplus to this tale, but his plan involves making use of both of their powers. He takes the pair of them up onto a rooftop, where Power Man lifts up and places a huge water tower on its side, and then Danny Rand, using the power of the Iron Fist, smashes it open. And the vast amount of water from the tower pours down onto the public below, shocking them out of their enthralled state. And then, as is often the case in these kinds of stories, it all ends rather quickly. The crowd have been subdued, the Purple Man has not only been arrested but gagged, which apparently means he'll never be able to reveal Matt Murdock's identity, and the Kingpin is unhappy with his foiled plan. Overall, this was pretty decent, although there were probably too many heroes, or maybe not enough pages. We have gone from the godlike threat faced by the X-Men to urban crime fighting. What next? Well, the following year brought another star-studded lineup, as Spider-Man joined forces with The Thing, Doctor Strange, Quasar and the Scarlet Witch. But I'm not going to cover that, as I'm sure one day I will cover Project Pegasus, and that is key to this issue. And by the way, it is a really good annual. So what about the next year, 1983? Well, that is a very 1980s issue, as Spidey teams up not just with Cloak and Dagger, but with the New Mutants too, neither of whom existed just 18 months before. Cloak and Dagger made their debut in issue 64 of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, during a great period for that title. The New Mutants made their bow in a Marvel graphic novel, before their own series started shortly after, at the end of 1982, although the cover date for issue 1 says March 83. Avid retro Marvel Man viewers will know what that is all about. Those early New Mutants tales were brought to us by Chris Claremont, naturally, and Bob McLeod. They didn't work on this, but the writer, a returning Bill Mantlo, was the man who first brought us Cloak and Dagger. The artist is oft Spider penciler Ron Frenz. We've got to check out this slice of 80s zeitgeist, haven't we? Well, we have a promising start with a nice time-lapse image of Spider-Man. This tale is called The Hunters and the Hunted, and at this moment in time, Spider-Man is hunting. He is hunting for criminal elements in the warehouse district. Recently, a number of drug runners have been found unconscious, numb with cold. Also, there have been reports of dead teenaged runaways. All of this sounds rather familiar to Spider-Man. It sounds very much like the first time he encountered Cloak and Dagger. That was in Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, and this whole annual has a very Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man vibe about it, which is a very good thing. He stumbles across a chop shop, a garage where stolen cars are broken down and sold for parts. And just as he suspected, Cloak and Dagger soon arrive on the scene. One of the criminals says, "I don't care if they appeared out of nowhere." They did. Get them! And then we are treated to seeing Cloak and Dagger in all-out action. Cloak with his mysterious cape of darkness, and Dagger not only with her daggers of light, but her awesome fighting skills. Despite their proficiency, they are outnumbered, until Spidey helps even the odds. Unusually for a team-up tale, there is no confusion among the protagonists. They all know each other, they all know they're on the same side. So instead, we are treated to seeing them do what they do best. But the whole chop shop thing is a front. What this organisation is really trying to do is to recreate the drug that triggered Cloak and Dagger's powers. Once the lackeys have been dealt with, our heroes find in a room several dead teenagers, all victims of the ruthless process to test the recreated drug. Cloak points out that they haven't been dead long because the bodies are still warm. Wow, this is dark. Yeah, it is Marvel Team Up. So let's lighten the tone a bit by going to Broadway, where we meet 4 members of the New Mutants. They've just come out from seeing Cats, not the film, obviously, and they've had a great night. Sam says that he promised Professor X that as soon as the show was over, they would return to the school. But Roberto has been enjoying himself far too much for it to all end now, and he persuades them to stay out a bit longer. Needless to say, they will all regret that. Whilst being entertained in an amusement arcade, they come across a rather unsavoury chap. He begins to bother the kids, but when he pulls a knife on Roberto, he does what's necessary to keep himself and his friends safe. But the knife-wielding chump is not alone. He has friends. And they want to make Roberto and his friends pay. They fail, naturally. But far from getting the ex-babies out of trouble, this only serves to attract even more unwanted attention, and they find themselves being chased by a whole host of street toughs. Of course, they prove no great challenge, and Danny even uses her power to create an image of their greatest fear, which turns out to be Cloak and Dagger. Bobby does eventually take a hit from someone's knife, and as Wolfbane leaps to his side, she takes a glancing blow from a bullet. Both of the casualties stumble down a nearby embankment where they lie unconscious, where two shadowy figures emerge from the darkness and state that they may have just found their two latest guinea pigs. Danny and Sam realise that their friends are missing, but the sound of approaching police sirens means that they have to flee the scene and work out how they're going to find their friends. So far, it's a brilliant setup. Let's hope it isn't another rushed ending. Whilst they search for their friends, Spidey searches for his. His spider sense draws him to a church on 42nd Street, where, peering through the window, he sees Father Francis Xavier Delgado, a man soon joined by two very familiar figures, because this is currently where they call home. But it's a small world, and he also sees that the fleeing Cannonball and Psyche have chosen that self-same church as a place of refuge. He doesn't recognise them, but he does recognise their costumes as being the same as what the original X-Men wore. Inside the church, Cloak and Dagger see these new interlopers, and they, not recognising the individuals nor their costumes, assume the worst. Oh, maybe we will get our traditional misunderstanding after all. We do, to a degree, but it quickly ends in a mutually suspicious standoff until Spider-Man arrives to clear things up. It helps that the two mutants are somewhat starstruck by the web-swinger. Danny and Sam explain about their missing friends, and Cloak and Dagger fear that they have been abducted by the same people that have been experimenting on the other teens in the city. That prompts them to leave the scene to go find them. Presumably, they're heading towards another known front, a meatpacking plant on West 14th Street, where we find our two missing teens in a rather unpleasant situation. They are strapped to a table and they will be subjected to that experimental drug. So why is this being done? The people behind it say that their plan is to get the drug just right so they can create an army of what they call junkie mutants who will do their bidding, do anything they want in order to continue getting a fix. Both of them make bids for freedom, but they are both weakened, and so their attempts fail and they face the needle. They are injected, although it doesn't actually show that happening in the comic. If only it had been delayed by, 5 seconds, because just after they receive the injections, our heroes arrive. God knows how the others managed to follow Cloak and Dagger, but when the entrance is as spectacular as this, who cares? They all then get the chance to showcase their individual powers, but there's a problem. The drug has taken effect, and as these aren't ordinary kids, it has made their powers go haywire, and Wolfsbane has been stripped of every vestige of her humanity. Sunspot's powers too have been enhanced beyond his ability to control them. Fortunately for our heroes, their first two victims are the head of the gang and the scientist that has been formulating the drug. The fact that this drug has enhanced their mutant abilities could tie in with the theory that Cloak and Dagger are mutants, because of course they are mutants, aren't they? Well, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Anyway, how is our current situation going to be resolved? In a face-off, of course. Wolfsbane leaps at Dagger as Dagger unleashes her daggers of light at her. Both hit their mark. The light daggers appear to have exorcised Wolfsbane of her most savage form, but in biting Dagger, she has transferred some of her saliva. Saliva that was contaminated with the drug. So now Dagger's powers are beginning to go haywire. It doesn't seem particularly difficult for Cloak to deal with Bobby, after he has mindlessly leaped at him and landed within the folds of his cloak, he emerges his normal self. But as with the contaminated saliva, Cloak has now been contaminated with the energies that he has stripped from Sunspot. Both of them are now beginning to lose control of their powers. But, as is often the case with these two, they have a symbiotic relationship, with their complementary powers helping to heal each other. The designs of these two characters often results in some great imagery, and we have one final example of that in this view of the aftermath. All is now as it was, and Spidey has a great suggestion. He says that Cloak and Dagger could be mutants, and as such, they could attend Professor Xavier's school. That would have been awesome. That would have fitted in brilliantly. As much as the offer is tempting, Cloak says that there is still much that they need to learn about themselves, and that is a journey that they must take together and alone. So the ending wasn't rushed. I'm not sure we needed Spider-Man, but what a brilliant comic. Bill Mantlo continued Cloak and Dagger's adventures that very month, as their first self-titled series began under his authorship. We moved from talk of beginnings to talk of the end, as just one more Marvel Team Up annual was released, and that was in 1984. It's an interesting one for sure, and again it screams 80s. From Spidey's black costume, and yes, that is actually the alien costume, to the guest starring team of Alpha Flight. It couldn't be more 80s if it was sponsored by Rubik's Cube. Now you may well want to see Spider-Man in action in his alien suit. Who wouldn't? However, I think 3 annuals is enough for one day. I do plan to do a deep dive into the world of the symbiote suit one day, and when I do, I promise we will return to take a look at this last Marvel Team Up annual. Oh yeah, it was the last one, wasn't it? Why was that? That is a simple one to answer, because there were just 4 more issues of the regular Marvel Team Up comic released after this annual. Incidentally, one of those featured Cannonball, and the very last one featured the X-Men. Times were changing, and team-up books were falling out of fashion. But look, if you want to learn more about that, then check out this link. With no more Marvel team-ups, there could be no more Marvel team-up annuals, which, let's be honest, is a real shame. Anyway, we haven't finished with the regular issues yet. So after this little interlude, we need to return to the main series.